Hello, everybody. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. And thank you so much for joining us for yet another webinar brought to you by Forth. Today, we'll be joined by our speakers to discuss clean transportation for all, access to electric vehicle charging. Our moderator today is Amy Hillman from OpConnect. And before I pass it along to Amy to introduce our speaker and start the panel, we have a few updates from the Fort team and some announcements. My name is Simbiat Yusuf. I am the Member Relations Manager at Forth. And again, thank you for joining us. Attendees, we ask that you please submit all of your questions through the attendee chat during the presentation. We will have some time for Q&A after all of our speakers are presented. We will also be sharing the webinar slides, the recording, and any additional resources in a webinar recap email. And for some of the new folks or some people that might have forgotten who we are at Forth and what we do, we are on a mission at Forth to electrify transportation by bringing people together to create solutions that reduce pollution and barrier. We are working in different areas to make sure this is possible. Our focus areas are access to charging, access to cars, access to emerging modes, partnerships, and policy advocacy. We hope through all of these efforts, we advance clean and equitable transportation for all. And our webinars and the work we do at Forth would not be possible without the support of our members and sponsors. If you're interested in sponsorship opportunities for the webinar, or membership opportunities and ways to partner with us at Forth, you can reach out to me, Symbiat. My email is on the screen. I will also be the one emailing you all the webinar recap, so you'll have my email that way as well. If you want to see what our members are working on or hear more about how we work with our partners, schedule a time with me and I'll be happy to chat with you all. And do you want to join Fort's growing team? We have two positions open currently. Our program associate working on the electric school bus program and a program manager for our access to charging team. If you would like more information about the open positions or you want to share it with your network, we will be sharing this position in the webinar recap as well. And we hope you already registered for the Roadmap conference. And I'm not saying this for the first time, or you're not hearing this for the first time, but you can register now and save with early adopter rates. The program for the Roadmap conference is also available on the website, roadmapfort.org. If you would like to learn more about sponsorship opportunities, we'll be attending the conference, we'll be speaking at the conference, and other opportunities available at the conference. You can find that information on the website. So go there. We'll add a link to the webinar recap as well. And with that, you've heard enough from me. We'll get right into the panel. I would like to invite Amy Hillman, Vice President of Sales at Upconnect, to come on stage. She'll introduce our speakers and lead us through the webinar today. Amy?
Thank you, Simbi. I'm thrilled to be here and really excited about this webinar on equitable access to charging for all. I'd love all the panelists to turn on your webcams, only unmute when speaking. And I'm going to have each of you just introduce yourself with your name, title, org, and anything about yourself. How about we start with Raimundo?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Raimundo Aranguiz. I am the CEO and founder of Electro Chile, a Chilean organization related to electromobility.
Thank you. And Whit?
I am Whit Jamieson. I'm a program manager here at Forth, doing a lot with EV charging, and happy to be here.
Thank you. And Ken?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ken Patrick, Senior Manager, Electrification Policy and Innovation at Ameren. In this role, I lead our efforts to develop strategies and policies for efficient electrification programs that benefit our customers, the environment, and the company. For those of you unfamiliar with Ameren, we're a rate-regulated electric and natural gas utility that has a service territory that covers a large portion of Missouri and Illinois.
Thank you, Ken. And I always forget when I'm moderating to introduce myself. As Cindy said, I'm Amy Hillman. I'm VP of Sales at OpConnect. We are a Northwest based EV charging solutions provider. I'm really interested in equity and access to not just charging, but the technology of electric vehicles. And so is the charging company I work for. What I'd like to do is start with a kind of icebreaker question, but pertinent to the webinar. Not your favorite color, but I'd love to know. We'll just go in the same order from Raimundo. And one thing I want to talk about that we had a lot of fun with on the practice panel is that the lens of equitable or inequities in charging that I experience is completely different internationally. So actually, Raimundo, I'm not going to start with you. Why don't I start with Whit? And what do you see as the biggest barrier that your organization is having in trying to provide equitable access to EV charging?
Well, I think there's a lot of different programs going on at Forth, so I'll try to just speak for the programs that I'm more familiar with. But some of the biggest barriers to equitable charging that I've seen and am seeing are um, around multi-unit dwellings, multifamily homes, and getting chargers that are installed in a way that's accessible. Often, chargers can be installed in multi-unit dwellings, but the prices people pay to actually charge their car is much higher. You're getting more commercial rates, so that's kind of a inequity there. In addition to just some, it's tricky to convince some property managers and property owners to install charging. So you got a lot of barriers there. So I'll pass it over to Ken.
Good deal. Thanks for that, Whit. For that question, I would say that electric vehicles are still considered a fairly new technology. And with many new technologies, some customers may not be aware of the benefits of electric vehicles and the options that are available to take advantage of electric vehicles. So to address this gap or this opportunity, our plan at Ameren includes quite a bit of outreach and education efforts. So, kind of in summary, we find that the customer mindset is one of the biggest barriers.
Thank you. Yes. And now for Raimundo, with that international perspective on the biggest barriers you're trying to address or see in providing equitable charging.
Thank you, Amy. Following the line of Ken, what we face currently in Chile, it is the overall cost of ownership of an electric vehicle is still a high amount of money. Said that, we do not currently have in place any kind of government incentive to promote and support the private investment on electric vehicles. Having resolved that, we see that in the near future, all the electrification on electric chargers will come along with the incorporation of a larger fleet of vehicles on the private side and also on the public side.
Thank you all. Great start. I'm going to ask everyone except for Whit to mute and get rid of your webcam. And I'm going to turn it over to Whit for your focus on multifamily homes and the barriers of access there that you already mentioned. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Amy. All right. So I'm going to go through some of these slides pretty quickly. Got a lot of content here. So apologies if I rush through. I know the slides will be sent out at the end of the presentation and end of the webinar. So I'll be talking a little bit about EV charging barriers at multi-unit dwellings, multifamily homes. There's quite a few names to say, AKA as known as for that. So So specifically, this project, the project that I've been working on for a little while now, is around multi-unit dwellings. It's called Vehicle Charging Innovations at Multi-Unit Dwellings, and it's a DOE 3-year project. This is kind of the overview of the objectives and really the phases. First phase was really determining the multi-unit dwelling barriers to EV charging, then demonstrating technologies, analyzing and developing findings around those technologies, and then developing a toolkit and disseminating said toolkit. And of course, if you have any questions during any of these slides, throw them into the attendee chat. We'll get to them in a bit. So some of the factors that get into some of the challenges are really around a lot of multi-unit dwellings have limited electrical capacity, parking constraints, and various other areas around allocating costs. And we're talking more than just apartment complexes. We're also talking HOAs, condominium complexes, and even homeowner associations more broadly can pose issues around installing chargers and the requirements there. And these are just some. There's a lot. So don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to summarize there. We did some polling on barriers that people are seeing out and about. These 6 were the top 6 there. HOA related really has been an issue for a lot of folks when HOAs don't want to let people install their chargers. It can pose a big problem, and right to charge laws have popped up around that to solve some of those HOA related issues. I'm not going to talk about the actual features in depth, but these are just some of the features that networked level 2 chargers can provide. It's kind of the baseline for MUDs as well. All right, so here's an overview of some of the technology solutions that were kind of found as potential solutions for multi-unit dwellings. So apologies for all the text. I'm not one to love a lot of text on my slides, but there's a lot of content here, and it's important to recognize dedicated charging as one of the main solutions in multi-unit dwellings that actually have enough capacity to reach a lot of different vehicles in their parking lot. There's no consequences for people plugging in overnight or even for longer periods of time. However, often tying in the actual energy use to the individual owner's meter can be really tricky. So there's quite a few areas here where there's issues, but dedicated charging allows people to charge whenever they want to. This especially is seen during deeded, when people have deeded spots, usually in a condominium complex where you have a deeded spot along with your unit. Yeah, and allocating costs has to be done very carefully. That's something to recognize. Okay. Another common solution that you see around multi-unit dwellings is shared charging, where you'll have a charger that can be used by a bunch of different people. Often these spots are located in unreserved or guest spaces, so tenants or residents can charge there and then move to back to their parking spot, their assigned parking spot usually, or even deeded. Sometimes you'll see these as well. If you have limited charging capacity or limited electrical capacity, you'll often see these, being used so that you're not having to factor in as much electrical capacity. All right. Mobile charging is a really innovative solution to charging at multi-unit dwellings and in other locations other than just multi-unit dwellings. So this is one that was really cool to learn more about, and it has some interesting opportunities, I think, for it. Also, there's off-site solutions, of course. If you do not have access to electricity and it's cost prohibitive to install chargers at your multi-unit dwelling for parked cars, you're going to have to find, or the EV drivers at that multi-unit dwelling are going to have to find off-site solutions. We had a demonstration project that we were able to get some data from And we got some interesting learnings from that. Like, people will use nearby DC fast charging hubs, even if the costs are pretty high. But this is a really potentially great solution. And if you want to increase EV adoption, like if you're a utility, or if you're a shopping center, this is possibly the way to go. You don't even necessarily need to have the fastest DC fast chargers out there for this to make sense. So this is some general guidance. I won't leave this up for too long. At the bottom, basically it depends. It depends on a lot of things. But this is kind of a rough, guide for what might make sense for your location, assuming these are the main limiting factors for you. So we are coming out with a toolkit, and the target audience is MUD residents, building management, homeowners associations. It's going to have a website where you can click on the resident link, and it'll take you to a kind of track where it'll go through the steps to detail out how you can do EV charging at your multi-unit dwelling. And all right, that is about it. The website launches in July, and we're really excited to get that out, and we'll be doing more outreach later on this year. And I saw some questions in there. We do have some interesting DC fast charging innovative solutions that are kind of partner with this project, and I think there's a lot more potential innovative solutions there additionally. So look for more outreach from me, from this project, and from Forth on this with regards to some of those DC fast charging solutions later on this year. All right, I'll turn it back over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Whit. And please submit the questions through the attendee chat. And to keep up with the time and make sure there's enough time for Q&A, I'm going to turn it over to Ken. Ken, go ahead.
Thank you, Amy. And for today's session, I was asked to speak on the utility role in addressing barriers to equitable access for EV charging. Let me see if I can go to the next slide here. Good deal. Thank you. And when I'm asked the role that the utility plays in addressing barriers to equitable access for EV charging, I go back to our vision, our values, and our strategy. Our vision is leading the way to a sustainable energy future. So electrification is embedded within sustainability, or ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. From an environmental standpoint, transportation causes almost 1/3 of all U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. So we know transportation electrification is a way to reduce the emissions. From a social impact, environmental always seems to be at the front and center when it comes to sustainability, but the social impact, is getting increased attention. And we saw that with COVID-19, which put the S in the center of the conversation. And we know that underserved communities are disproportionately exposed to elevated air pollution. Again, transportation electrification is a way to reduce emissions and place people at the center. And the G, the governance of ESG, is part of our strategy, is to enhance regulatory framework and advocate for responsible policies. And we have to do this in order to be successful. We have to have the right policies and programs in place. So that's from a vision standpoint when you look at the utilities role, Ameren's role. The next thing I look at is our values when we're looking at providing benefits of EVs and charging to all customers. Along with safety, diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of Ameren's core values. When I look at transportation electrification, I look at it through a DE&I lens. First, diversity. We have a diverse customer base. We have 2.4 million electric customers. And we want to make sure the benefits of electrification are accessible to all our customers and communities. The E, the equity. Underserved communities are often hit first and worst by the impact of climate change. As a new technology, electric vehicles have the potential to vastly improve the health and well-being of our communities. Unfortunately, as with many new technologies, it's often only the most affluent of our communities that experience these benefits first. So one of our focuses is making sure we eliminate the barriers to bring the benefits of electrification to all customers. And one of the ways we do that is the I in DE&I, that's inclusion. So that's authentically bringing traditionally excluded individuals and or groups into the processes, activities, and decision making up front prior to a solution being fully baked. And we know in order to ensure the benefits of electrification, that to ensure they're available or accessible to all customers, we're working very closely with both internal and external stakeholders. So we're working across the company in both Missouri and Illinois. In addition, we're collaborating closely with multiple industry groups, including ATE, the Alliance for Transportation Electrification, EEI, EIP, EPRI, Forth, and others. We know that making electrification accessible to all customers is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Our customers use various means of transportation, including personal owned vehicles, public transit, rideshare, etc. So our plan is to address each of these types of needs. For my remaining time, I just want to share a few examples of what we're doing to help address equitable access and various means that our customers use for transportation. Next slide. So for mass transit in Ameren, Missouri, we have a partnership with Bi-State, which is a local transit company in the service territory. We've built a new substation to support Bi-State's fleet electrification efforts. Right now, Bi-State currently has 20 electric buses that are currently in service. And on the Illinois side of our service territory, we're taking a similar approach. Initial conversations with Bi-State are also taking place in Illinois. Next slide. Addressing school bus transportation is also part of our plan. As part of innovation efforts, feasibility studies are being worked in partnership with EPRI to help identify opportunities for schools to convert their fleets. And on Ameren, Illinois, in our Ameren, Illinois service territory, we have 2 electric school buses that are in operation, and we're supporting school bus adoption in many school districts. The ribbon that I have below in this slide, I think most folks on this call may be familiar with the IIJA, which has with the Infrastructure Jobs Act, which has a clean school bus portion associated with it. So we are following that very closely as well. Next slide. I stated that we want the benefits of electrification to be available for all our customers. So our plan includes connecting electrification in underserved communities. We have multiple outreach efforts in which we are bringing customers into processes, activities, and decision-making upfront prior to solutions being fully baked. So I just included just a few examples on this chart. The first that I can hit on is a landscape analysis. EV Noor is currently completing a landscape analysis of our service territory. One of the goals is to gain a better understanding of Ameren's frontline community members' awareness and attitudes towards clean transportation options. Another effort that we currently have going on is the Silvers program. This is a program in partnership with Forth. It stands for the St. Louis Vehicle Electrification Rides for Seniors program. And it's an EV shuttle service that provides non-emergency rides to elders and distributes food to homebound seniors across St. Louis. And the last effort I'll just briefly touch on is the Affordability Mobility Platform, another effort where we're partnering with Forth. Ameren will be working with Forth to provide the benefits of car share to affordable housing community members in the Ameren service territory. The project is designed to place electric vehicles and chargers at affordable housing organizations and allow residents to rent an EV for a small fee. Next slide, and I think this is my last slide. I focus so far on things that are happening within the Ameren service territory that we're focused on, but we know that our customers want to travel not just within our service territory, but throughout the nation. So as part of a national highway coalition, we're collaborating with EEI and several of our utility peers to develop a network of charging stations along highway corridors. So in closing, utilities play an important role in making sure that equitable access for EV charging is available. And it's a very exciting time to be in electrification. With that, I can pass it over to Amy.
Thank you so much, Ken. I love seeing the utility perspective and the way you've handled it there, and look forward to the Q&A. I'd love to turn it over to Raimundo. Remember to put your questions in the chat.
Hello, Amy. Good morning again. Good afternoon, everybody. My mission today is to put a perspective about international. I'm going to be talking about my home country, Chile. We are located in South America. And to explain a little what we have done in the past 10 years about electromobility and electric chargers. I am the CEO and founder of Electro Chile, Chilean corporation dedicated 100% into the implementation of electric mobility solutions. To put you in perspective, Chile is a country located in South America. It's around 20 million inhabitants with an income per capita of 24,000 US dollars per year. Said that it is a country under development, that it grows and tries to keep the pace year over year according to the technology and the worldwide changes. Said that, we have very interesting things that supports and promote the electromobility in Chile. The first one is that Chile is the number one producer of copper in the world, with over 5.6 million metric tons per year. To put it in perspective, the second one, it produces roughly 2.7 million metric tons. So Chile pretty much doubles up the second place in copper production. And as you know, electric vehicles and electric chargers, they utilize quite a few copper in their manufacturing process. The second largest component that Chile provides into the electromobility industry, it is the lithium. We are the second largest lithium producer in the world as well. So in supporting to the copper, we also provide quite a few lithium to the battery manufacturers around the world, which also helps to us to introduce the culture of the electromobility in the country. Roughly, there are 42,500 megawatts under development for implementation in Chile in a mix between photovoltaic, air, hydroelectric, with a 92% renewable technology, which is very good. And very happy to say that right now Chile has operating over 700 public transportation buses in the city of Santiago to provide the transportation of a large amount of a population, roughly 63% of the people in Santiago, which is 7.2 million people living in the city. They transport every day using public transportation. So having already 700 plus buses in service currently, it is something very proud to say. In terms of the electromobility plan that the country has in place, it is a very challenging plan. Actually, by 2035, all public buses in the whole country, they will need to become electric. So any new bus that it comes into service by 2035, it is mandatory to be electric. Said that as well, we provide also a very aggressive challenge with the light and medium duty vehicles. In that case, by 2035 as well, they will need to become electric. And finally, the heavy duty and machinery, especially on the mining and forestry segments, by 2040, they will need to become fully electric. So as you see, they're very challenging objectives that the country is moving towards the electromobility. There are four important elements that we need to work on in the country, that they are, first of all, the zero emissions vehicles, the development and implementation. Second, the infrastructure of electric chargers that right now we have just 818 units in place and working in the country. The third one is the education of the user and also the maintenance people about electric vehicles. And the last one is the legislation. As I mentioned at the beginning, we do not have any kind of government incentive or subsidy to acquire electric vehicles. So that is kind of a major thing that we need to work on in the near future. Also, a challenge is the norms. Worldwide, there are three major norms for electric charging. We have the North American norm, the European norm, and the Chinese norm. All three, they are completely different one to the other. And in Chile, we have all three. So that's a very important challenge that we need to face. And we work every day in order to have a unique charger to comply and work with all three norms in parallel. Also, what is next? First of all, the expansion of the network of electric chargers. And that is very important because, as I mentioned before, we have three different norms working together that they do not talk each other, but they need to live together, right? So that is a key element to develop in the near future, how to simplify the charging process for each individual. The second one is the housing and office infrastructure. Currently, as we know, most of the charging process is being done during night at home or during the day at the offices. That is a major thing that we need to develop in Chile right now in order to make more accessible the charging locations to every user of an electric vehicle. The third point is the cost of ownership, which I mentioned before. So we need to kind of support and help the need of government support for acquiring an electric vehicle in order to expand the electromobility in the country. And finally, the fourth one that we are working as a country as well, it is the battery recycling. That is very important because after 8 years or 10 years, we're going to be facing the need of recycling the batteries of the cars and find a way to do not pollute in that end of the cycle of the electromobility world. That's what I can summarize in a few minutes about what we have done in Chile. What are our next steps? Thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much, Raimundo and Ken and Whit. I am really excited to get to the questions, which are robust. So the first one, I think everyone can turn on their webcam, please, and unmute as called on or as you see fit to jump in. The first question from the attendees is, what is the role, and this is, we were again in the practice webinar really interested in our North American bias on equitable solutions. So Raimundo, we're going to encourage you to chime in and say, well, it's different here, it's different, this is something you could think about. The first question is more towards the multifamily housing. When you hear MUDs, that's multi-unit dwellings. I've found on the East Coast of the States, people call it multifamily. What is the role of public DC in the community supporting multifamily is the question. And I'm going to throw in and level one, because I saw that in the chat. That's something I think about a lot and talk about. I'm going to go with Whit first. Same order.
Well, there's a lot to talk about there. I'll try to go quickly. And there's a lot of different thoughts around this. One thing to note is if you're able to get in charging when you're first constructing a building, the cost difference between level 1 and level 2 is very small. And that's really important to recognize. The cost difference when you're retrofitting a place is very different, potentially very different. However, the actual cost of the wire is not that big. Yes, we're talking some difference. There's not that much. That said, level 1 charging is fantastic for people that really don't drive that much, or when they do drive a lot, it's usually around times where they're able to charge for a lot longer, either right after they get back or right before they leave. So level 1 really can be an adequate solution, but it's also important to recognize that as these longer range vehicles and really heavier vehicles come out, that a level 1 charge is not going to give you very much range. Some of these heavier vehicles really aren't even getting 2 miles per kilowatt hour, which means you are getting, maybe a mile or two for every hour of charging, which makes a 200-mile vehicle a very, 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 very long charge. And so level 1 is not an adequate solution for people that, have a longer range vehicle and are relying on level 1 at home. And then I think this is where I'm going to give Ken some room to run, but DC fast charging is potentially a really good solution. And I think this is where you can start to see utilities step up and offer subscription services for off-peak DC charging. Portland General Electric here in Portland has a program like that. And I think there's a couple other utilities out there that are doing something very similar. And I even know there's like an EV charging service provider that does that as well. So those packages can go a long way to provide accessible and equitable and fast charging to folks that need it. It's just there's not that many charging stations out there yet. Anyway, I'll pass it over.
I'm gonna take Ken, the role of DC in multifamily. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so we know that now the majority of charging, it takes place at the home. So from a utility standpoint, we want to make sure that we have infrastructure in place to support the habits of the customers. But one of the things that Whit mentioned, and one of the things that we're working with customers on, is that overall mindset. When is the best time to charge? So one of the things that we're offering as a utility is time of use rates, which would help influence customer behaviors so they can take full advantage of the cost benefits of electrification, charge at a time that is more affordable. And what that will also allow us to do is to have downward rate pressure. So that's to reduce rates for everyone, not just those that have electric vehicles, but as we utilize the grid in a more efficient manner, we can also lower rates for all. So we see it as affordability. It fits into our affordability strategy for our customers. So it's really, providing the benefits of electrification, from the sustainability portion I mentioned, from environmental, social, incorporating the governance, but it's also not just health, but it's reducing cost for our customers. And it plays into that overall strategy.
Thank you. And Raimundo, how would you like to? You can say
How to
anything you
start?
want.
Well, I want to start answering a question that I saw related to how we can work together with the three norms in a single charger. And the answer is, it's very simple. As you know, we have AC charging and we have DC charging. Under the AC charging protocol or speed, first of all, Chile is a 220 volts single phase 50 hertz market. So when we need to connect a 32 amps AC charger and provide 7 kilowatt of load or charge, our network is already set up for that as a base starting point. Said that, the European certified chargers on AC level, they are capable of be configured as a socket style charger. In other words, the charger does not come tied up with a hose or supply hose. They just have a socket. So into that socket plug, you can connect a wire between the charger and the vehicle that on one end, it will have a type 2 or mode 3 call cable, Mennekes style. And in the opposite side, you can have either a J1772, you can have the European norm, or you can have the GBT Chinese norm. On the DC side, there are in the market already fast chargers talking about over 50 kilowatt of capacity that in the same equipment, you can have one supply hose with a CCS2 or combo 2, CCS1 for North America, and in the other side, you can have a GBT DC cable. So happy to say, currently there is in the market worldwide chargers that can work for both speeds, AC and DC, and being able to supply the energy no matter where it comes the car.
Thank you. And actually, I'm going to stick with Raimundo and go in reverse order for this one. This is a question about how much of the organizations you represent are addressing charging and equity, but charging in general because of regulatory requirements, or how much of it is market forces. And Raimundo, I know we talked about this when we met. I'd love to hear from you on this first.
Thank you. Currently, the market is driving the process. It's not the government is following what the market it is asking the government to step up. The legislation currently is an open legislation that incorporates different technologies and different standards into a unique market. Just putting in perspective, Chile has 63 different car manufacturers brands. In the United States, we have 42. So it is a very wide options of different manufacturers with different norms. And the government, what is working right now is to unify in terms of accessibility of the chargers. We have a very low cost energy produced in the country because of the desert in the north portion of the country. So at the end, happy to say the private hand, it is working side by side with the government hand in order to promote and implement electric vehicles and electric chargers across the country.
Thank you. And Ken, in your experience, how much of your actions at Ameren are from regulatory, and how much are from market forces? I think serving your customers.
Okay, and we're a rate regulated utility, so just about everything that we're doing is regulated. But one of the things that we're doing is, when I mentioned ESG, the governance part, one of the main things that we're doing is advocating to make sure that we have the right programs and policies in place. We're very customer centered, but in order for us to serve our customers in the way that we believe will be beneficial for our customers, we have to make sure that the rates align. So that's the how I would frame that question. But in order, that response. But in order to make sure that we're advocating for the right programs, policies, that gets back to that inclusion that I was speaking about, that outreach to better understand what truly benefits our customers. And once we have a good understanding of that, it's not just Ameren advocating; it's us advocating along with our customers. So it's making those right collaborations and the right partnerships.
Wonderful. Thank you, Whit.
I don't think. I mean, Forth is a nonprofit, so we aren't exactly regulated. So definitely market driven. And I wanted to touch on something that Ken said, because I think it's really important to recognize that there's a lot of solutions out there that meet the needs of most people most of the time, but in terms of their minimum charging needs for their EV, for owning an EV, and that doesn't go far enough for a lot of people. A lot of people are still hesitant to buy an EV. Obviously the cost is pretty high right now, especially because the market conditions are not the best, to say the least. But it's really important to recognize that people's needs when it comes to EV charging don't always equal the reality that you see from this is technically feasible to do level 1 charging, but people might not feel comfortable doing level 1 charging if say they occasionally need faster charging and aren't familiar with some of the chargers nearby them. So really meeting people where they're at and understanding their needs is really critical to getting infrastructure right.
Yes, and thank you for that. I wanna address an audience question again. That it's about total cost of ownership. In this case, it was about a school bus. How much is a gas school bus? Speaking of regulatory items, I mean, the incentives and rebates to buy an electric school bus make it doable, even if they'd save on the total cost of ownership. But what's the difference? Who would like to speak to this? Like, you can pick a school bus as the example asked, or another total cost of ownership EV versus internal combustion. I'm going to guess Whit, but Ken, you may have some expertise on this I'm unaware of. Whit it is.
Well, I would pass the specific costs to a colleague of mine when it comes to gas school buses versus electric ones. I'm not as familiar with those details. Apologies. Ken, do you have some more details on that?
What I can say is that light duty vehicles right now have, that's where we see, it's being the closest to cost parity. So, and I mean, and one of the things that I'll say about even Ameren, we're trying to lead by example. So we have our own internal fleet, and we've set internal fleet goals. And as we're looking to electrify our own fleets, we're seeing that the light duty vehicles are right now, for the upfront cost, are the ones that are closest to cost parity. And we're looking at, medium duty, heavy duty as well, but the upfront cost and the technology isn't as advanced right now for those. But we are continuing to watch the market, and we are making sure that we have the infrastructure in place to support it.
Yes, and the
But
weight
I wouldn't call myself the expert either on the cost of school buses, unfortunately.
Well, and you probably know, I mean, the thing about the medium duty and heavier is the wait time on those vehicles, even if they are there, is quite a bit. And you're right on including the charging on my end of the house, the charging side. We often see a major municipality converting their light duty, their sedans, et cetera, to electric because the total cost of ownership works out in the long run, but the charging stations are cost prohibitive. And it's like that's such a small percentage of the vehicles, but it's not something that they were thinking about. Um, so
Amy, I
I'm
can share you the experience that we have in
yes.
Chile about public transportation. There is something very interesting to take as an idea for US and many other countries. In Chile, at the beginning of this year, it got awarded a contract for the next 15 years for different operators of transit transportation in the city of Santiago. Over roughly 7 million people living in the city. And what it is that for the companies participating in the call on the bid, it was a mix between diesel-driven buses and electric buses. And the offer that it came with electric buses was able to spread in 14 years the investment, the overall cost of the project in 14 years, while the traditional diesel-driven bus, it had only 10 years to spread the cost of the operation. Said that, as a surprise, the final cost of operation, including diesel and electric in either side, it became lower the electric operated buses. As a matter of fact, they from a total of roughly 2,300 buses that they're going to need to be incorporated in the next 2 years, over 800 they're going to be electric as a result of these additional years that the tender provided as a reward or prize for those companies that were bidding electric. And we cannot forget that the electric bus, in terms of maintenance and operating costs, they're extremely low comparing, especially nowadays with the cost of the diesel over $5.5 a gallon. It is extremely becoming affordable an electric operation over a traditional operation. So I see opportunities in this field. I see opportunities of the government to reward those contracts where bidders are coming into the picture with electric vehicles over diesel-driven vehicles.
Thank you, Raimundo. On that note, will you talk a little bit about on the call something we were pretty interested in is that we, in our North American lens, tend to talk about equity and multifamily charging, that people who rent, people who have historically not benefited from advancing technologies are not going to get to because they don't have charging stations at home. And how do we solve that? But in your case, equitable access to this technology is coming largely through public buses. Could you speak a little to that? And if you're talking about multifamily charging at all where you're at.
Yes, actually, on the multifamily side, we're a little behind, and the reason why is because the developers of the complexes, they are not still realizing that each project takes roughly 4 to 5 years to become reality after they begin with the first idea. Then, and so when we are today at ground zero, telling them, gentlemen, you need to implement electric charges in your upcoming project, they are not visualizing that need because they don't see many cars being driven on the streets as a private user. In the opposite arena, we have the public transportation, as I mentioned before, that it has been expanding very strong, and it will very strong expanding in the whole country in the next 2 to 3 years. So it is we have a very important challenge to step up on the multifamily side to implement electric chargers. Just very briefly, on the electrical side, we do have the energy, and we have a very affordable energy, and we can produce a lot of more energy because of the reality of Chile as a country, which we have a very vast desert in the northern portion, the driest one in the world, with photovoltaic systems. There is a very interesting project that I invite everybody to Google it, which is called Cerro Dominador, Dominator Hill, which is a thermal photovoltaic system that during the day it grabs the energy from the sun, and during the night the same sun power it gets stored in the top of the tower, and it warms up water, and that water becomes vapor, and then during the night it generates electricity out of that vapor. It's an extremely interesting project that is in the internet that you can Google it, and you will see how we have been able to combine electrical, thermal, wind in different solutions, and have the power at a very affordable price.
Thank you, Raimundo. Will you pop that in the chat at some point, or Simbi? Last question that I think we have time for. It gets back to the equity, the diversity, equity, inclusion goals. I'm going to put two together here and hear from Ken and Whit. What are the prominent DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion goals that have been publicly addressed to and committed to? And when we talk about moving to equity and access to electric, then of course there are jobs that are going to be converted. I say converted instead of lost from the ICE internal combustion engine side of the house. So Ken, what would you say? I think you've spoken to this quite a bit, but with the ESG, but what are the diversity goals that have been publicly addressed and committed to from your view?
All right, and we have a goal to serve all our, we don't pick and choose which customers we serve. We have a goal to serve all our customers, and one of the things that that I'm working to do is making sure that we have the right priorities in place. So I mean, we want to make sure that we're putting things out there, services that address customers' needs. So when we talk about equity, we're not just putting infrastructure out there to put infrastructure out there. It's understanding our customers' needs and putting the right solution out there for our customers. So I mean that's one of the first goals, is to make sure we understand what the customer needs, and based off of that, the solution will, what we put in place will help, whether it's incentives, and making sure that the customer even understands all the right the benefits that they can get. So I would say that's a starting point, and really kind of where we are in this journey. I mentioned the biggest barrier up front is that mindset, and it's really two ways. I mean, it's not it's us understanding our customers just as much as it is us coming to our customers with a solution.
Thank you, Whit.
Well said, Ken. Yeah, I think you got to start with understanding the community's needs and making sure that the community is a part of the decisions that come out of the brainstorming of the next steps, and giving the community the ability to strongly influence and hold power over the decisions that are made for their community, specifically with where EV chargers are placed, with there's other decisions in that kind of sphere, but getting the community involved and doing so in an equitable manner that actually allows people to contribute. And there's a lot of nuances there, but ensuring that the community has decision-making power on projects, and understanding that the status quo is not an option, but that your real choice is, do you want to be a part of this solution and create it in a way that you have control over, or is it something that will be handed down to you, which is sort of how we've done it for the last all of the history of the United States.
Thank you. Yes, and I'll in this last bit touch on it. My dad's a mechanic, so I'll touch on the job loss. He actually works for NHTSA now at the feds, and he, of course, was very concerned about job loss, due to the conversion. And I think it's like any efficiency. I have seen many, many community colleges, even as much as 10 years ago, start to incorporate service of electric vehicles. It's usually just brake and fluids, but into their auto technician programs. And there's certainly jobs to be had on the battery upcycling side of things, and other components of the EVs, even in manufacturing, but it's not a quick conversion. So that is always a concern and very real. Thank you for asking that. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Simbi to finish. Thank you to all of our panelists today. It's been a lot of fun. You have our contact info here. Please reach out to us. We're all super accessible and love to talk about charging and equity and EVs. Thank you, Simbi.
Thank you so much, Amy, for moderating the panel. Thank you, Whit. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Raimundo. You'll see the contact information for our panelists here. We will also be sending a webinar recap, and you will have the contact information for our panelists there. Before we wrap up the panel today, we have one poll question for you all. We want to make sure our topics are emerging and highlighting the content you all are looking for. So did you find this webinar informative? And looking forward as we plan our next season, wrapping up 2022, some of the topics. So if you have topic suggestions, things you're not seeing, things you want to have a discussion about, please feel free to send those information to me, and I will make sure to put them in consideration. Thank you all again for joining us on this Tuesday, April 26th, as we are wrapping up April. We're hoping for some sunshine. I can say that at least in Boise, some sunshine, and I hope you all have some amazing weather where you're at. I'm going to close the poll now, and we will get through the outro. We want to say we hope you can all join us on May 10th, Tuesday, May 10th, where we will be discussing electric powered equipment. Our speakers will be highlighting incentives, policies, projects, and we'll have a discussion around best practices, lesson learned from real world applications of construction in the construction and agricultural sectors, as we are working to electrify those sectors. To electrify transportation for all, that means electrifying transportation in every sector. So we hope to see you then. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you all again.